So the first thing is to cover what are called the 4 characteristics of karma. Then there are 4 types of results of karma. Then there are 4 parts of karma. And then there's what's called the weight of karma. And hopefully we have some time to go through these, and what we don't go through we can cover next week. So the 4 characteristics of karma. The first one is that it's definite. The second one is that it grows. The third one is that you don't get a result if you don't create the cause. And the fourth one is that you must experience the result of causes you have already put into play. How many of you have already been through this with me? Peter, we went 49 classes, brothers. What you talking about? What you talking about? You like this one? Okay. So the karma is definite, has to do with this idea that the result is always similar to the cause. So if the cause is virtuous, then the result is positive or favorable. If the cause is non-virtuous, then the result is unfavorable. Subjectively, don't think of it as an environment or something that happens to you. Think of it as what ripens in your mind under certain conditions. Right? You can be on the beach, all systems go, and have a moment of depression. That is the ripening effect of past causes. You can be in the rain in Sri Lanka and detouring and not being able to see your loved attraction and be filled with joy because you have the blessing of being just as happy with whatever might emerge that day. You follow? So when it says the principle is that karma is definite, what it's saying is that it's not possible to conceive of putting into place a cause that delivers a result that's incongruent with the cause. It's definite. It's definite to produce a result similar to its cause. So I'm just trying to use the language that's in the book so that you can reflect on it over and over again. Karma is definite to produce a result that is similar to its cause. Karma grows. I think the first principle is really to dispel any fantasies that there is any randomness. Our thinking that things are random is considered a false view. It's considered the 10th non-virtue, wrong view. To think that things are random, or to think that you just got lucky, or to think that you were unlucky, is basically implying that there's no causality. And one of the established, in my opinion, unjettisonable virtues or values or principles of the entire thing is causality. If it doesn't make sense, like the perspective of liberation doesn't make sense without consequentiality and causality. It just doesn't make sense. It would make enlightenment like a lottery. Enlightenment's not a lottery. The path isn't a lottery. The path isn't a crapshoot. Right? Some of us got lucky. Some of us made it. Some of us are going to make it. The others not. You don't know if you're going to make it. Rolling the dice. No. It's definite. It actually instills, by way of logic, it instills confidence. Actually, I think sometimes with these things like karma, a little faith gets you in the door, and the rest of your reason gets you through the path. Do you follow? Karma is one of those weird things where, especially for us, given where we are in our culture and our history, without a little faith in people we admire, in the scholars, in the tradition, in Lama Tsongkhapa, that faith gets us in the door. It's like, okay, I'll entertain this. But then entertaining it and believing it is not going to be enough. Then you have to really test it, and you have to look at it so deeply, and you have to look at it for a long time, and you have to really weigh out to dispel the doubts that you have. And if you have any doubts, that will be very, very hard to proceed along the path that is predicated on consequentiality. Do you follow? It's very hard to proceed on the path if you think it's a crapshoot. So believing doesn't do any good, but then also not believing means that you won't even entertain the possibility, which means, and that's what's happening in the secular culture, is that they want to dispense of karma, and then it leaves big shadows around how things are actually working. And the teachings on karma is to open the hood and show you how the engine works. And the engine is not a mystical thing for the few. An engine, your engine and my engine and his engine and their engine, they all work the same. The engine works the same. It's definite. Karma increases. Karma increases is that I try to see it as a charge. When we have an action of thought, it's a movement of mind. A thought is a movement of mind. And people like Lena and Phil that work in the realms of energy understand this, I think. That mind is energy, and thoughts are energy, and thoughts have power, and thoughts have impact. And they don't just dissipate. They don't just arise and fleet. They leave traces, and they leave residues. And speech is the same way. And action is the same way. Things don't just disappear. They leave traces and residues. They leave traces and residues where? In consciousness. Immaterial residues. But we can use analogies like seed and field to approximate what karma energetically must be like. So start to think that your thoughts, when they arise and you respond to them, that response, whether it be a counter thought, a verbalization, or a movement into action, doesn't just dissipate in the moment, but it carries its own movement forward or energetic charge that then becomes a new seed in a future moment. And if the cause is there, but the conditions aren't there, then something happens to that charge. What is it? What's the principle? Second principle of karma is that it grows. So if it doesn't ripen, it amasses strength over time. I don't know if we can come up with an analogy where that's actually true physically. Maybe compounding interest in your bank account. You put a fixed amount of money in, well, not in the American bank accounts anymore. One day in my parents' generation, you could put money in a bank and it would amass. That little sum of money over time would accrue. So on the basis of thinking, speaking, and acting, there's a seed that is planted, and over time it accrues. Now it accrues in both directions. If it's a virtuous thought, it becomes bigger. And if it's an unvirtuous thought, then it also becomes more powerful. And then if you don't purify it or try to mitigate it, then it can ripen as a bigger ordeal. So this becomes really important when we get into the purification idea, because purification is necessary as quickly as possible. Try to apply the antidote, because even on the basis of slipping up, if you can quickly ameliorate it, it's like catching a snowball at the top of the mountain rather at its base. And the same is true for collecting merits. The reason that we dedicate the merit is because we're consciously saying, I don't want to bank this now. It's like it would be taking like money out of Bitcoin now. Why would you do that when in 10 years Bitcoin's going to like rule the planet? So you wait, because while you're waiting, what's happening to it? It's growing. And you don't want a new boyfriend. Right? Maybe you do. You don't want a new job. You don't want to feel momentary moments of contentment or satisfaction, what you're banking for is the vast accrual with compounding interest dedicated to a specific outcome, which is what? That's what your whole practice is trying to do. You're accruing merits so that you're creating a charge of energy that can be dedicated for a particular, or it's almost like channeling I just saw today these images of Ladakh, where the snow melt from the high Himalayas is being forced into these very narrow gorges, and what power there is in that velocity and ferocity of that energy that's being channeled. And the narrower the gorge, what happens to the energy and the momentum in that channel. And if, in other words, if those obstacles weren't in their way and the gorge opened up, what would the energy and the charge would diffuse itself, right? So there's something to the accrual of the charge when it is constantly and repeatedly dedicated to a singular focus, like enlightenment. May I awaken for the benefit of others. May I awaken for the benefit of others. Considering all the amasses of the virtue that you're creating on the basis of your good deeds and of practicing virtue and prostrations, purifications, prayers, recitations of text, reflections on your lamrim, decency with other people. You're creating a flow of positive energy, and then you dedicate it through the narrow doors of samsara, and it liberates. So this is the idea of the second principle, that karma grows. And now in pop culture, we have the same notion that the butterfly that flaps its wings on one side of the planet creates a what? We call it the butterfly effect, don't we? It's like something small then can have massive repercussion. So just put it in context. What it's teaching us is don't think anything is small and inconsequential. Don't think anything that you're doing on the virtue side is small and inconsequential. Like one nice word, one nice deed, one moment of restraining yourself, one moment of not letting yourself send that vicious email. They're not small things. They have the potential to have big impacts. And we've been conditioned and pre-programmed in very, very small range or bandwidths of time and space where we think what I do, we think in terms of such acute results. We're not thinking in the long-term effects. Like the loving kindness practice that Manoj delivers, okay? At first you're taking deep breaths, you're actually touching your heart center, you're going through a phrase like, may I be well, and then you're going, well, I didn't do anything. What do you mean? Didn't do anything. What's it supposed to do? Right? Because you're looking for that immediate thing, that immediate result. But then think about someone who was raised in an unholding environment with no good mirror, not supported, has ingrained and indoctrinated over long periods of time the position vis-a-vis themselves of self-condemnation. Can we relate to that? Yes, we can all relate to that. So what we're experiencing right now is the accrual of something very small that has now become so significant, we've identified with it. That energy has, over time, accrued to become a human being's predicament or life, the main way that they see themselves. And so if that's true, it seems like we can always look at the negative case and agree, but then the positive case is a harder stretch of the imagination. But it's also true that the one stanza or one phrase, may I be well, may I be worthy of someone's love, in one moment it's one little thing, but maybe over time it accrues. And maybe if you do it repeatedly, it amasses. And as it amasses, it becomes more you. So don't underestimate the power. Third principle, You'll never experience the result of causes you don't initiate. So this is a characteristic that's important for those of you that are waiting for your lottery ticket. It serves two functions, this reflection. It serves the function, of you not waiting for it to fall out of the sky. But it also serves the function of providing fearlessness. Because if you live a life of virtue, you can hang on this quality or characteristic of karma to feel safe. Because if you didn't do it, it's not going to happen to you. You see what I'm saying? It is emboldening. It makes you have a lot of courage. If you start to see the world as you're the master of your world, you determine what's happening. Mostly it's happening unconsciously. Now it's going to happen consciously. I'm going to favor the good. I'm going to try to heed the bad. The more that scales tip, and the less vice that you become afflictive and allow to dictate your activity, more confidence can happen that in the future you will live a much more sustainable life, a much more contented life, a life much more free of reactivity, and that might not mean that the environment is conducive. It will mean that your appraisal of the environment is much more favorable, and you can have confidence in that. And I think this is, some of you guys have already heard this. Those of you that have been around the block and around lamas, they often say this about refuge. If you take refuge, those that have taken refuge already in Sri Lanka, those that you have taken refuge in Nepal, those of you that take refuge in India, and those of you that took refuge prior to CSP, they say that when you take refuge sincerely, you will not fall prey to the lower realms. Have you heard that? Ever heard that? What are the lower realms of samsara? Hungry ghost, hell realm, and animal realm, right? They say that, and they say that if you take refuge, you prevent yourself from devolving into lower realms. And when I hear that delivered in a traditional context, it sounds very religious. It sounds like good people go to heaven. But I think if you start to appreciate the nuances of karma, it's not the taking of refuge like some mumbo jumbo at a sacred site where you're chanting, like if you just believe in the refuge. You take the refuge and you say the refuge vow, Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa, you say that. And you do it at a holy place. There's some virtue in that. But if you leave that space and then you allow your mind to be afflicted, and based on that affliction you're aggressive, then the refuge has served no purpose, and the refuge can't protect you. But if you take the refuge commitments and you take the refuge vows and you hold to them in your everyday life, which means you do not kill. And remember, every time we take refuge in the traditional context, the monks and nuns, they tell us, try to just hold this, brother, for a day. Try to just hold this for a day, sister. Try to hold this for a day. Between the time that you take it in the morning and the next morning when you retake it, try not to kill. Try not to lie. Try not to be sexually inappropriate. Try not to steal. And try not to intoxicate your mind. And if you're able to do that for one day, the chances or the likelihood of you actually causing a domino effect, a ricochet with your behaviors and with your thought and with your speech is incredibly diminished. And if that's true, then the result is also negated. It won't happen. If you don't, you will not experience the result without first putting into play the cause. So if you hold your vows and commitments and pledges with mindfulness, that's how it really prevents you from falling into the lower realms. If you're living it. And that's why I think religion is everywhere. I think there are religious Buddhists. I think you only have to stroll around the Nepali Bodhnath Stupa. I think you only have to stroll down the sidewalk in Bangkok or Sri Lanka, where you find very, very devoted people who, God bless them, their devotion is very pure, and it's very sincere, and it's very meritorious, and it's very virtuous. But it's not that much different than when we went to church and prayed, and then we were like a little bit of a jerk in the parking lot. You know what I mean? It's like a good Sunday, what do we call them? Good on Sundays? Huh? Belief doesn't matter. And there's no God to condemn you. You're the God. You're the God of the cause and effect mechanism in your own mind. So you can't lie. It's not like cheating on your taxes because the IRS won't find out. It's your consciousness. You know. Fourth principle, you must experience the results of things that you have done. And this isn't little Johnny or little Mary goes to hell. Forever. See, there's no forever. There's ripenings, and then there's plantings, and there's ripenings, and there's plantings, and there's flow. You don't go to hell forever. You have moments of torment. Many of us are survivors of many moments of torment. That torment, that psychological torment, is largely the product of how we have related to the things that have happened to us. And we have to take responsibility for that. We don't have to take responsibility for the things that happen to us. We only have to be responsible for how we're relating to the things that happen to us. That's where the distinction that I set up at the top comes into play. You're not responsible for what people did to you. You're only responsible for how you relate to it. And if you keep relating to it in the same way, then you will keep ripening the same effects, unless you start to mitigate the seeds, which is, this principle is very closely tied to purification, which we'll try to spend the next class talking about different kinds and varieties of purification. They're predicated on that principle, the fourth characteristic of karma. Okay? Can we move on? How's the energy? It feels a little stagnant. What do we need to do? We had a nice break. We had a long break. What should we do?
We only have 15 more minutes.
Did you hear that? We only have 15 more minutes. Types of karma, types of the results of karma. There are four. There are four types of karma. There are two that have to do with the result is similar to the cause. There are two ways that a result is similar to the cause. Similar in terms of experience, similar in terms of habit. What does that mean? Let's try to be favorable. Let's try to look at the positive spin. Okay, let's try to look at, let's say, being kind. Let's continue with the Manoj, loving kindness. Okay, being kind, sincerely being kind, not forced being kind, but sincerely being kind. Being generous with your time, for example. Being generous with your courtesy. Offering somebody a hand, offering someone a moment of validation, being a good mirror for them. The result is definite, right? Because it's virtuous, the result is definite. It means that you'll have a favorable outcome. Favorable subjectively, not favorable environmentally, right? And that favorable outcome can be born or manifest in two different ways. It can manifest as a moment of you yourself feeling appreciated, or feeling safe, or feeling loved in a future moment. Because you loved, you will feel love. That is the result that ripens as experience. Do you follow? The result that ripens as habit is that you are more inclined to be loving in the future. Like being decent, like Walter. Walter's a great example, pops up in my mind. Not that you guys are all heathens. But Walter is exceptionally well-versed and natural in kindness. And that is the result that is ripening as a habit because of prior moments of being kind, it now comes easily. And when it comes easily, then think about what the implications of that are. Your karma wheel is in spin in a favorable, it has momentum. So the ripening effects come more easily. Does it make sense? It's wonderful to use real examples like Walter, because it's like when you get around people like this, you feel their energy and you feel their sincerity and you feel their sweetness, and it's not a show, it's not contrived. Like I have to like twist my arm to be kind. Where there are other people that comes more effortless. And as a result of it becoming more effortless, the fusion factory of their own well-being is now more effortless. And I like that we're using the positive spin, because it's too easy to always focus on the negative. Like if I was starting about, like if you're really aggressive, then the resulting ripening would be that you would feel chastised and ridiculed by others, or you would create the habit, the well-oiled habit of being critical of others. So these are considered two of the four ripening results. One is that the result ripens as an experience, subjective experience. The other is that it ripens as the result of a particular kind of predisposition or habit or tendency. Based on karma is definite, so virtue produces one of those two things. And karma grows. So if you're doing good things, then that's how you get a Walter. That's how you get a Tenzin Zopa. Tenzin Zopa's body and mind are the result of a long life spent of virtue. You can feel that on that call, even if you've never met him. He's the sum product of a lot of virtuous activities that now are becoming effortless. I told you what it was like to live with him for 2 weeks in Bodh Gaya, where he didn't need much convincing. And in Nepal, he didn't need much protecting. It's like that has grown to become a personhood. Third one, the environmental result. So this traditionally is talked about like you will be born in a place where there are no crops and everybody is starving if you have been greedy. It sounds very religious to your ear, doesn't it? But then where's the emptiness of that? The emptiness of that means that everybody in those places are absolutely starving. And that's not the case. It's actually the case that you can find evidence for places where there's so much abundance, people are starving there. We live in a country just like that, don't we? So you say, oh, you were born in America, that's a favorable rebirth. You were born in India, that's an unfavorable rebirth. Big generalization, because guess what? You can be born in America and starving. You can be born in India and you can be fine. There's the emptiness. So that's why I like to nuance the environmental result more as your experience of the environment. I keep doing this. Hopefully you get it right now, that we're not trying to sabotage or derail karma teachings. We're just trying to continually put them back on the level of psychology and perception and subjective experience, because that's where the ripening effect takes place. So as a result of your incessant abuse of others, for example, you will in a future moment experience the result as the environment is hostile. As a result of your generosity, you will feel that you will experience an environment as being abundant. And then the final one is the result that is the ripening result. And the ripening result has to do with the karmas that are firing at the moments of death that then preclude and determine your rebirth, what realm you get rebirth. Okay. How are we doing for time? We're out of time, so we're not going to go into the next two. We'll save those for next week. Well, let's just juice press here. So when you hear Geshe Tenzin Zopa say rejoice, right? How many times have you heard him say rejoice? What he's doing with that is he's juice pressing. You have a good fortune, you have a moment of contentment, you have a moment of joy. It is not random. It is the consequence of prior activity. Now it's coming to fruition. In a way, once it comes to fruition, the seed is exhausted. How you relate to it determines another seed. Make sense? So you have a moment of contentment. It is the flowering of a prior moment. Once it flowers, the seed is extinguished, and the result is experienced. How you relate to that becomes the seed in the moment for another future experience, right? So you get some of these cats who are well trained in rejoicing, and what are they doing? They're experiencing the ripening result of their prior virtues. It's flourishing as a moment of contentment and joy in their mind. Then they're relating to it by rejoicing and saying, this is wonderful. I deserve it. I hope others deserve it. I hope others benefit from this. Then in that moment, another seed of virtue is put into the pipeline. And that's how they're maximizing, extracting the essence, and getting a big, big, big gulp.
Jumbo.